Okay, so we've got the teeth in just about the right position now. There's going to be a little bit of fine tweaking once we get the waxwork done. I'm going to adjust these canines very slightly and so on. But for now, let's carry on and get this waxwork tidied up so the polished areas of the dentures and make them look reasonable. So to do this, I'm just going to pop my model off the articulator to start with. And what we're aiming to achieve is here on the palatal side, we're going to want pretty much a featureless surface really. So we want the wax surface to blend up into the teeth. Some people carve a line around and put some detail or an incisive papilla just here in the palate. I tend not to bother. Patients, when I've tried to do it, patients often find it a bit irritating and so on. So by default now I just put a nice smooth surface on the palatal. But of course on the labial aspect, where we've got the polished surface in this sort of aesthetic zone, round from the sort of the 4 to the 4, then we want a little bit of detail in here so that when the patient smiles, it's not going to be obvious that it's a big slab of pink plastic here. So we're going to put a little bit of detail in around and then make a nice hygienic finish between the polished surfaces and the teeth. So to start with, what I tend to do is take a nice hot knife like so, and then we just run around all the teeth to start with and blend the wax together. So I'm just getting the hot knife probably going into the waxwork by a millimetre or two, probably 2, and that just lets any little bits of trapped air come out of the wax, tidies up all the little marks and scuffs that are in the wax, lets the wax run down in between the teeth. And then what we're going to do is bring the wax up onto the teeth, up to the cervical margin of the tooth. So you can see when you look at the artificial teeth that there's a bit that's supposed to be embedded within the wax, and we want to cover that over with wax, of course. And we'll do that as a second phase. I'll just nip round these last few on this side, and I'll show you what I mean. And then the polished surface along the buccal corridor, really we want to try and get to be concave in shape if we can, so it wants to run in between the sulcus and the teeth. Just blend it in here, and behind the teeth we can just narrow it off. We haven't talked about not putting the 7s on. We can put 7s on dentures. They tend to be a bit of a nuisance really, so wherever possible we don't, as a rule. They're a nuisance because they sit up the slope of the alveolar in the lower and tend to displace the denture forward. Excuse me. And also the teeth at the back closest to the hinge are the ones that are going to contact first on closing, or when we go into lateral excursions if there's any small discrepancy or occlusal error or interference. And it can be very difficult to see those, and the patient can get more force on those, of course, because they're nearer the muscle and nearer the hinge. So overall we're probably best to leave them off. So initially I'm just going to do one side and talk through it, and then I'll whiz through the other side as we've done in the previous videos and show you the finished result. But I'll just tidy the wax around these incisors here, just so we've got a reasonable canvas to work on. So hope you can see now that as the wax cools down it all becomes one colour and it's all homogeneous. It's gone down in between the teeth, so we're looking pretty good at that. So now what we want to do is bring the wax down to the cervical margin of the tooth. So you should see this little line around each of the teeth where we want to bring the wax to, and we want to create an impression of the tooth going into the alveolar and create that eminence above the canine and so on, to give a little bit of detail. Not too much, we don't have to go mad. It's just so that it breaks up the light as it bounces off the plastic. So a little bit at a time. You don't want your wax too hot. That was a bit too hot. And we're just going to run the wax around over the neck of the tooth. We call this bit the neck of the tooth, the bit that goes into the pink acrylic. Same over the lateral. It's best to sort of just do alternate teeth really, and then you haven't got wax running everywhere. Do this canine on this side again. A little bit more, and then we can start carving to shape. To carve the wax, we're going to want the wax to be nice and hard. To be hard, it needs to be cold. So I might just nip off in a second, just to speed things up. Just run this under the cold tap. Just do a little bit down the buccal corridor as well, just to make sure we've got enough material, wax material over these teeth to carve at. You don't want to put too much on, otherwise you'll spend the rest of the day carving it away again. Let's blend this in a touch. Right, just in between the lateral and the canine there, it looks a bit scrappy, so I'm just going to pop a bit in. We want a bit more over that central, because I can see the neck of the tooth showing through. I'll do the upper right central incisor as well, just so we've got a bit of material to work with when we're carving. One more bit and then we can cool it down, I think. That's about right. I say it's about right. And then I add some more wax. There is no right or wrong really. It's just how we want it, how much detail we want to carve in. Right, I'm just going to run this under the cold tap and then we'll start carving. Actually, before we do, I'll just show you what we're doing on the palatal. For the palatal, I tend to just use the back end of the knife, the spoon-shaped part. And we can blend this in. Something like so. Careful not to burn the shellac if you're using shellac. I've got to say it's not my favourite material. I tend not to use shellac overall. I'm going to use a light cured acrylic instead. The ultimate is to have the base made in the definitive material before we start all this business. But commonly shellac or wax are used, so that's what we're doing here. Okay, so I'm just blending that in. Just want a little bit more wax around these teeth. Then we'll be able to just flame that and get it nice and smooth. Okay, I'm going to cool it down under the tap. So hopefully you can see now that the wax is all one consistent colour. So the next thing to do is to put some detail into this labial surface, and for that we use typically a carver like this. This is an Ash 5, and I think the simplest way to go about it is to draw a line up in between each of the teeth like so, around to the 4, and then we start with using the convex side of the blade. It wants to be clean. Normally we don't really put these in the heat. I don't normally put these in the heat. Sometimes I just warm it very slightly just to get any old bits of wax off. But it wants to be a nice clean carver. And then we're starting above the central portion of the long axis, if you like, of the canine, and we're cutting down into that line we've drawn in between the teeth, like so. So I'm just doing this action, cutting down into that line, leaving the eminence over the top of the canine here. So start at the top, cut down into the line, like so, get rid of the debris, and then when you shape that nicely, you can start at the line and cut up onto the next eminence above the lateral, which doesn't want to be quite so prominent. Let's blend that bit in up at the top. Where I've spilt wax and it's gone over the land area of the model, I'm just tidying up so I get everything in proportion. So that was the canine, the movement, carving down into the line that we've drawn, carving up onto the eminence of the next tooth, down into the line in between the lateral and the central. So that's that action again. There's only two actions really. Carving down into the line, carving up onto the next eminence, blending it in up at the top where it disappears, if you like, into the labial sulcus, and then finally into that midline, and then up onto the next eminence above the central. So we've gone down, up, down, up, down, up. We'll do the next one as well. Okay, so hopefully you can see the difference here between the two canines. This is before we started, this is where we are now. We'll just do this detail above the fore going into the canine as well, and then the further we get back, the less detail required really. We can just smooth that out and try and make it concave as best we can, depending on where the teeth are positioned and how much material we've got there and so on. So that's about it really. So the next thing I do is just take my carver again, this time same action but a little bit more finesse. So really lightly now over the surface, trying to smooth out that surface, get rid of the scratches, but it's the same action, getting rid of all the carvings that we've created, like so. Hope you can see. So I'm not really trying to change the shape now, I'm just making the surface of the wax nice and smooth, like so. Get rid of all the bits, and then at this stage you can either take a flame and run that across the surface of the wax to smooth it, or you can use a piece of tissue or dental gauze just to give it a smooth, or some people go as far as using some orange solvent, which smooths the wax by dissolving it slightly. Let's just get a bit of tissue and we'll give it a rub and see if we can smarten it up a little bit. So that just helps get rid of any fine scratches off the surface and the wax off the teeth and so on. Just a little bit of something there, look. Just needs taking out. Little bubble there, I think. And there we go, that's as much detail really as I'd expect to put in. The next thing to do is to create this nice hygienic finish between the wax and the teeth. So let's tidy up this area in the buccal corridor a touch. Make that a little bit more hollow. So now to create this nice junction between the waxwork, which of course is going to be acrylic, and the teeth, we can take our wax carver again, this time using the tip of the carver, and we hold our carver against the tooth at about 45 degrees to the tooth surface, and then we can make one nice cut following the cervical margin of the tooth, like so, all the way around. A little bit higher on the canine, of course, keeping your blade flat, and then round the lateral And we'll do the 2 centrals as well. And then this bit of wax below the cut we can just flick off, like so. And you can see I've got a bit of a discrepancy here. This looks like we need a bit more material taken off. Let's take a bit more off there so it all blends in a bit better. Follows a nicer line. Okay, magic little bit of tissue again, just to take the edge off that cut that we've made. And we should be just about there. You can see I've got some wax remaining in between the teeth. I'm just going to flick that out to tidy it up a touch. Anything that's on the teeth we don't want. Like so. And we're about there really. Wax on the teeth doesn't look very nice, obviously. It's a nuisance when we come to plasking and packing, because it means that the teeth will pop out of the plaster, as we'll see when we get to that stage. I'll show you what I mean. So, nice rub, get rid of any final little bits, and then hopefully you can see that we've got some detail around the teeth now. Slight undulation in the wax surface, so as the light bounces off, it's not just a big bling of light bouncing back. Following the cervical margin, we'll just do it with a little bit more taken off that central. Let's just give that another little go. This looks like it wants to come a little bit higher, in my opinion. Like so. That's better. Get rid of those bits. A little bit of wax there. Okay, and that's about the lot really. Now you can stipple the wax. Some people use a toothbrush just to beat it up a little bit. I tend not to, just leave it as it is for the time being, see how we get on. If the patient's got a particularly high lip line, then we might want to go a little bit further. But for now, that's pretty much it for the labial and the buccal surface. Just want smoothing out a touch here where I've skated over. It's the right shape. So again, I'd just take my knife, smooth it out a touch, bit of tissue, just to get rid of the bits and pieces, and tidy that up. With this nice edge that we've created to the wax, hopefully the denture should be a little more self-cleaning. You can see what's happened here on the palatal. The wax has blended into the teeth. You can take any wax that's gone up onto the cingulum of the teeth away, like so. Blend it all in, and again give it a rub with some wax, or take a flame and just smooth the wax out. Same in the palate here. Take any lumps and bumps that we've got where we've spilt wax from earlier on, and then I might just grab a flame just to smooth this out, to show you the use of that. I don't often use a flame, to be honest, but lots of people do. Let me just grab one, hang on a sec. So we can take a pin flame, something like this, and just run over the surface of the wax carefully. Just flash it really, just so that you're just melting the surface without letting the underneath of the wax get too warm. Kind of highlights any of your errors as well, like this one. And we've got a lump of wax in there. Let's get rid of that. I'll give it one more go. Okay, so that's one side done, pretty much. Right, I'm going to work away at the other side, and then I'll see you when I've finished, and we'll have a look at what we'd do on the lower. Pretty much the same thing, really. I'm getting carried away with the pin flame there. Need to stop. Okay, I'll see you in a few minutes when I've done the other side. Okay, so we're just about there now. It just needs a little bit of tidying up. I've done the other side. We're just about symmetrical. There's a few little bits and pieces that I want to just take off. Before I do that, I'm just going to show you around the periphery of the denture. You can see where the detail finishes that we've carved in and where we're going down into the sulcus. So I'm just going to take, again, the back end of my knife. I don't want to take away that nice fit with the sulcus, but I just want to blend the two bits of wax in together, or blend the wax together like so, and then pretty much we're there. We want to give this a clean up, and then that can go off to the clinic to be tried in. Okay, so you can see there's some residue of the articulating plaster, I think, from there. Just where I've rinsed it off, so that just wants rinsing out and cleaning up. Give it a buff under the tap with some cold water. Some people use a little bit of soap and cotton wool just to clean them up. I'll just get these bits of wax off the model as well, possibly boil, put them under the boiling water, just to clean the models up a touch, and that'll be ready to go. And then we can have a look at the lower. So with the lower, we're going to do pretty much the same thing, less detail really. Just take that off the articulator. So here I'm going to want to, again, tidy up around the teeth to start with. So melt the wax in, and then I'm just going to shape this area behind the sixes, the molars here, just so that it's not quite so bulky, and the tongue can sit on the polished surface on the lingual aspects, that wants to be as concave as possible. This wants to be concave as well, buccally if possible, and it wants to just knife edge behind the molar. So I'll have a go at that, and we'll speed this up again so you're not watching hours of video. Okay, so we've got all the wax on the lower. It's nice and cold now, so we can carve this to shape. We're going to follow pretty much the same ideas as we are for the upper. Not a great deal of detail around the labial, but these areas on the buccal of the polished surface, we want to try and get concave as best we can within the limitations of where the teeth are positioned and the buccal sulcus and so on. Likewise, on the lingual aspect, make this as concave as possible, and then we can blend this material into the distal of the tooth, distal of the 6. Let's get that chunk off there and make that a nice shape for the cheek to sit against. So I'm just going to do some of the bulk work just with my wax knife here and just take some of the material away to create these concavities as best I can, and just trim some of this material away as well. That's not looking too bad now. We want to try and keep the footprint of the denture as large as possible, of course. Let's go pop this off. I've got some wax just on my model here, which just confuses you a little when you have the wax work on. I'm just going to tidy up the edge, the periphery of the denture actually, before I go much further, because it's just looking a bit scrappy. So I'm just going to use the spoon end of my knife and just whiz around there. Trying not to change the shape, just blending the wax together where additions have been made and so on. And where we've been carving away, I'll just tidy it up a touch. And just exaggerate that concavity there. And then same on the lingual. You may have noticed that this lower denture and the rim before it didn't actually have a shellac base plate in it. It's one that we produce en masse for teaching, so we just have a mould of the wax rim and make dozens of them for our students, because they just use it as a rim rather than actually doing anything with it. Okay, so let's just carve this to shape. So back to my wax carver now, smoothing this wax, that concavity along the buccal side, leaving a little bit around the teeth, a little bit of bulk here, just so we've got some material to secure the teeth in up to that cervical margin again. Similar around the front, concave where we can, leaving the material around the necks of the teeth, over round onto the buccal on the patient's right. Same story. Take that lump out there. And we'll do a little bit on the lingual as well. There's that balance between getting a nice shape to the denture, and on the other hand we don't want to make the denture too thin, so we need the material a reasonable cross section, otherwise we're going to end up with a weak denture. Right, not far off at that really. So I'm just going to do this the quick way with a flame. And then we'll tidy up around the teeth. Just let that cool down for a second. Okay, we've got the wax a bit cooler now. I've just run it under the cold tap to speed things up a little, so we can go for it with our carver, creating this nice finish around the teeth. So again, we can put some detail in here if we wish, down at the front. You tend not to see the label of the lower denture. It looks a bit high, that tooth there, doesn't it? Might pop back to that one in a sec. But we certainly want it to be hygienic. It depends on the patient as to whether you're going to see any of the lower denture or not. Sometimes we just like to make them look a bit fancy. This one we're going for the functional approach, so we want a nice clean finish between the teeth and the wax, which will be the acrylic, of course. Let's pop that off there. Same on the other side. A little bit lower on the canine, a little bit higher on the lateral. Take this off, and then we'll get a piece of tissue and give that a tickle. Let's take that square edge off. And it's a little bit bulky down here, just have a bit out of there. No, not so bad. Still a little bit bulky this side. out, blend it in. We'll have a look at that central incisor, I think, when we get it back on the articulator and just see what's going on. It looks a little bit higher than the others. Might just whiz a bit off it or lower it down. Okay, something like that. Take away some of that bulk, and then we can take a piece of tissue, just like we did for the upper, and give it a rub just to get rid of any bits and pieces. Any of the bits that we've carved, take those off. Clean the teeth up, take away the sharp edges, scratches, and then we'll have this back on the articulator. And I just want to have a look, as I say, at that central incisor, and also just have a look at what's going on with those canines, because there was a bit of interference when we went sideways. The tips of the canines were just colliding a bit. So let's pop this back on, give it a trim where necessary, or move the teeth. And then we can get this cleaned up and ready for trying on the clinic. To do that, we'd want to double check everything, pop it in some disinfection solution for the appropriate amount of time, 10 minutes with the one that we use, and then it can be bagged up. So let's just, we've got the condyles loose, let's just go into that protrusive excursion. Not looking too bad. We've just got a bit of here where it's lifting the pin off the articulator. I'm just going to grab a burr and I'll be back. So when we're looking at contacts, I mean, these are large contacts which I can see clearly when I move the articulator. If we want to get more detailed, we can take some articulating paper or silk and we can mark the contact. You can see really clearly where this is contacted. I'm just going to reshape that very slightly. My burr that's running backwards, just to allow those posterior teeth to take the bulk, and we'll do the same on this side. We're not looking too bad at that. There's something at the back just causing the anteriors not to come together, and you can see that this one looks a little bit low relative to the, they all look a little bit low really. Let's have a look. We might just pop those central incisors up a touch. Let's just have a look here. That one just needs to go up and straighten up a little bit. This lateral up a touch. And the same with this one. That's not bad, that's going to be fine. They're not quite perfect. There's something just at the back here causing the pin on the articulator to lift a little. Let's have a look, see if we can just get rid of that for now. And then, so just run into that excursion. It's just on that premolar. Let's just whiz that down a touch. There, that's not bad now. We'll leave it at that for now. When we, let's move that canine up a smidge as well, where I've probably trimmed a little bit too much. Once we've processed the denture, we're going to be grinding the teeth to get everything working nicely. And at that stage, we'll talk through it and make sure, and at that stage we'll talk through it and make sure that we've got all the contacts. But at the moment, I think we're pretty good there to go to trying to see if everything's in the right ballpark. Make sure we got the registration correct in the clinical stage, and then we can finish off and process this denture if all is good. Okay, I'm just going to let that little bit of wax cool down, recontour that front bit. And we're done. Okay, so ICP contacts between the upper and lower posterior teeth. We've not bothered with sevens. We don't unless we need to. This is our working side excursion. You can see that we're pretty good there. Working side excursion on the patient's right hand side. Just a little bit of something making it go from there. That's a bit better. Try and get everything as snug as we can. Looks like that molar could do with just shunting up a touch. Just give that a tweak. Okay, we're not bad at that now. And then in protrusion, we want to see those anterior teeth contacting with some contacts on the back teeth as well. Only going up to edge. Yeah, we don't need to go beyond that, obviously. Just up to edge. And we're done. Balancing side contacts, of course, so when we're coming this way, the mandible's moving away from the camera, you can see the palatal of the upper and the buccal of the lower, hopefully, just about there, contacting. And this is our balancing side contact on the patient's left. Hopefully you can just about see what we're trying to achieve in there. Not the easiest thing to do, to see. I'll just tidy this bit of waxwork up and then we're done for now. And I'll see you in the next video where we'll process this denture into acrylic. Lovely. Okay, that bit just needs to cool down. We should be okay. I'll give it a final wipe with tissue. Get it cleaned up. Good stuff. Any questions? Let me know.